David Crosswell had always prided himself on his patience. For decades, he had been careful, calculated, a man of precision. His world was built on control. And then, he broke his own rules. He didn't know it at the time. Didn't realize that his last mistake would be his greatest. Not until it was too late. Not until the bars closed around him. Not until she walked into the room. Avery Blackwell. The name meant nothing to him. But the eyes? The way she looked at him? That was familiar. David leaned forward, studying the woman across from him. The way she held herself. The measured breath. The steady gaze. She had waited for this moment. Not just for days. Not just for months. For years. And suddenly, David understood. He wasn't in control anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. And the worst part? He had never even noticed. For 20 years, David had studied people. He had read them like books, turning their lives into carefully planned pages. But this woman sitting across from him. She wasn't a book he had written. She was a book he had never read. Avery Blackwell. A name he didn't recognize. A woman who didn't belong here, yet sat across from him as if she had always meant to be. David tilted his head, the faintest trace of amusement flickering across his face. "You seem familiar." Avery didn't react. She merely placed a small recorder on the table. Pressed play. A voice, his own, filled the cold, sterile room. A reading of his past. His patterns. His mistakes. David listened. Silent. Still. Because suddenly, he understood. This woman, Avery Blackwell. She had been studying him, just as he had once studied others. And she hadn't come for an interview. She had come to close the story. David sat back, watching her carefully. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't afraid. She should be. But instead, she was in control. For the first time in his life, David Crosswell felt it. The shift. The realization that he wasn't the one pulling the strings. That he had never been. Avery Blackwell leaned forward, her expression calm, deliberate. "You don't recognize me, do you?" David didn't answer. Didn't blink. Didn't let his mind race back 20 years. To the one who got away. To the one he had lost. The woman smiled. Slow. Knowing. And when she spoke again, the name she used wasn't Avery. It was the one he had erased from his memory. A name buried beneath years of forgotten mistakes. Emily Carter. David's fingers curled slightly against the table. A flicker of something sharp passed through his chest. Not fear. Not anger. Something worse. Recognition. David didn't move. Didn't speak. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one asking the questions. He was the one being studied. Emily Carter. Alive. Sitting across from him. And suddenly, everything he had overlooked, every uneasy feeling, every lost opportunity, every moment where something had felt off, made sense. She had been there. Watching. Tracking him the way he once tracked others. For 20 years. David exhaled slowly, measuring his response. "You spent all this time looking for me," he said, voice calm, even. "Why now?" Emily's expression didn't change. But something flickered in her eyes, something sharp, something painful. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. She slid it across the table. David hesitated, just for a second, before flipping it open. Inside, a single photograph. A girl. Familiar. Rachel. His breath slowed. Rachel Miller. His last mistake. His final pursuit. Emily's voice was quiet. This wasn't supposed to happen. David studied the picture. something he had never realized. Emily's fingers curled slightly on the table. She was my best friend. The words were steady, controlled. But David understood. For the first time in his life, he saw something in someone else that he had never truly understood. Rage. Not the kind he had studied. Not the cold, calculated anger he had always mastered. This was different. This was personal. Rachel wasn't just another name. She wasn't just a mistake. She was the one thing Emily Carter could never forgive. And for the first time in 20 years, David Croswell realized. He wasn't the one in control. David stared at the photograph. And in an instant, he knew. Rachel Miller. The name wasn't buried somewhere deep in his past. It wasn't a forgotten mistake from decades ago. It was fresh. Recent. His last act of control. And now, sitting across from Emily Carter, he realized. It was also his downfall. His expression didn't change. His breathing remained steady. But his grip on the folder tightened. Rachel Miller had been his final mistake. Because he hadn't known. Hadn't realized who she was to the woman now sitting across from him. David lifted his gaze, locking eyes with Emily. There was no satisfaction in her expression. No relief. Just cold, calculated truth. You never saw it coming, she said quietly. David didn't answer. Because for the first time in his life, he had nothing left to say. He had spent decades studying people. And yet, the one person who had been watching him the entire time? He had never seen her. Not until it was too late. Emily watched him in silence. The photograph still sat between them. Unmoving. Cold. Just like his expression. But she saw it now, what she had waited years to see. Not guilt. Not fear. Something worse. Regret. David swallowed once. Slowly. She wasn't like the others, he said quietly. Emily didn't speak. She was perfect. His voice broke slightly on the last word. She reminded me of something I thought I'd lost. And I didn't realize what I was doing, until it was already done. Emily leaned forward, her eyes fixed on his. She was everything you claimed to be looking for, she said. And you broke her. David didn't deny it. He couldn't. I tried to forget her, he whispered. But I never could. Emily's jaw tensed. She was my best friend. The words landed like a blade. And that's what you'll never understand, she continued. You didn't just take someone. You took the only person I trusted. And you walked away like it didn't matter. David closed his eyes. Not to block her out. But to hide from himself. Emily stood. The moment was over. There were no more games. No more masks. She reached for the folder, slid the photo back inside, and looked at him one last time. You spent your life trying to find someone who would never leave, she said. But in the end, you destroyed the only person who would have stayed. She turned toward the door. Stopped. Then looked back. You never caught me, David. But I caught you. And then she walked away. No victory. No peace. Just the end of the story she never wanted to live. But had to survive.